The Tag on the Key, Book 1, The Plan, Chapter 25B, Testimony. But when we went to Majdanek, this was just the most terrible, as much as I experienced after. They put us in cattle cars. They pushed in I don't know how many people. They really wanted us to die. We were in those wagons. I don't know how many people were there, but my brother died in my arms, and my husband's two sisters. There was not enough oxygen for all those people, and they kept us in those wagons for days. They wanted us to die in the wagons. You know, the cattle cars with such little windows? My brother was around 13. He was not even bar mitzvah. So you know, when my brother died in my arms, I said to myself, I'm going to live. I must be the only survivor for my family. I'm going to live. I made up my mind that I'm going to defy Hitler because he wants me to die. I'm going to live. I'm going to just be very, very strong. And I went to Majdanek. And this is the interesting story, because when I went to Majdanek, they put me in a block with 500 other women. Somebody told me that my mother is there. My mother was taken a few days before, as I mentioned. So I went to see her. And you know, my mother was there. So it's like I lost her twice, really. But she was very, very lost. She was lost. She was very passive. She was very lost. And, you know, they gave you a portion of bread and a portion of soup for the day. My mother became very skinny, and she was very thin, and she was very lost there. So I used to bring her my soup. I brought it to her, and I just cut off a little piece of bread for myself, and I said to her that somebody gave it to me. Eat it. And then I would run out, because if she would say to me, eat a little bit, I would eat. I was very hungry, but I felt that she needed it more than I did. I used to give her the soup and run out because I didn't want to be tempted that I should eat with her. She was in the camp with me for about 6 weeks, 2 months. Every few weeks they used to have selections. And one day just before they took me to Auschwitz, I walked down with her, and she went one way and I went the other way. I had a friend, and we were hiding out in the ghetto together. We were childhood friends for many years. She didn't let me. She pulled me back. And I said, how can I let her go? And she said to me, Helen, you are not going to help her. You know where she's going. And I stayed. And then I went to Auschwitz. They sent us to Auschwitz. I was the only one left from my family. My husband was separated from the beginning. The men went different, separately. In Majdanek, one of my husband's sisters was with me. And she was such a strong girl, a beautiful young woman of 25 or 26. And we slept on the same bunk. And she developed diarrhea. And she was very, very cold. And she only wanted me to lay next to her to warm her body. She just didn't feel anything. She had, I'm not sure what you call it, dysentery or something. It was just awful. I had to lay next to her because she was dying. And she said, Helen, please stay next to me, warm me. And she was the last one. She went too. She died in my arms just like my brother did. It wasn't a bed. It was a bunk for 5 people. It was straw. And she was lying there. And the smell was so awful. I was dying. But she was so scared. And she was crying that I should stay with her. So I did. I stayed with her until she became cold and stiff in my arms. I remember when I was in Auschwitz, and there was a girl there who had a baby. Would you believe it? She had a baby. We were able to hide this baby for months. We delivered the baby ourselves. I don't know. I just don't know. I really cannot. It's very hard. It's very hard to explain it to you. It's very hard to explain. We just did it. What we had to do, we just did it. Our aim was to defy Hitler, to do everything you can to live. Because when you live, he wanted us to die, and we didn't want to oblige him. This was our way of fighting back. In Auschwitz, the day started at 4 o'clock in the morning. 4 o'clock in the morning, you had to go outside, stay 5 in a row. The block was 500 people in one block. The Germans had a compulsion, and that's why they have such fantastic records. Had to be counted, every single prisoner, every single day, by number. Every block had so many people. They had to come and count you. We used to stay there for hours. This is the way they wore us down. We used to huddle our bodies together, because the bodies gave up some warmth. For hours we used to stay in those appels, and after this, the orchestra started to play, and we went to work. We had an orchestra going out to work, and an orchestra coming back. You never heard of that? German marches, that we should march. I don't remember the music, but we had an orchestra leaving in the morning and coming back at night. The orchestra was made up of prisoners. Whoever played an instrument would play in the orchestra. I would say that they had about 10 or 12 people in the orchestra in the morning as we left to work, and in the evening when we came back. There were some Jewish melodies that they would sneak in. I remember that we used to march. We would march with the Germans, and they had dogs. If somebody would try to run away, I remember that they would try to play melodies that encouraged a rhythm of walking. There was a Yiddish song, the words of which meant, "Don't tell anyone that this is your last march." This is the partisan song. There were like 5 or 6 girls who were working in the pulver room, where they actually loaded the ammunition and grenades. They were every day searched from head to toe, naked, and when they were going to work, and when they left work, but they were able to smuggle out some of the pulver, some of the powder, in the vagina or in the mouth. The powder was in a capsule, a very small capsule, that was inserted into the grenade. Then we gave it to the men, and we blew up the crematorium. In Auschwitz, I want you to know that there was in the camp, in the concentration camp, surrounded by Germans, really the impossible. We did blow up one crematorium. When the Germans were looking through the ruins of the crematorium, they were able to find the shells, and they saw that it was from our factory. This was in 1944, at the very end of the war. You see, I was liberated in Auschwitz in January 1945 by the Russians. The war was going very badly for the Germans at the end, and they took 5 girls and they hung them. They were all 18, 19, 20-year-old girls. One girl, I slept with her in the bunk. I knew both sisters. One of them was working there, and the other was not. This was written up in the Hadassah magazine. The story was so heavy with me. I just never got it out of my mind. It was so painful. And the whole camp had to watch. And they were hanging there for 3 days. When I talk about it, I just have so much pain. Sometimes at night I lay, and I can't believe what my eyes have seen. I really cannot believe it. I was in Auschwitz. Whenever I got up in the morning, the lines were unbelievable. The kids, they used to come in, waiting in line to be burned. Whenever I got up in the morning, I said, my God, how can you allow this? The kids were standing in line waiting to be killed. The children didn't know. You see what they did? They showed them, when they went into the crematorium, they saw our camp. So they saw that people were working and that a whole camp was going on. So when the people got off the train, they saw our camp. The crematorium were a little bit around the corner from there. There were lines every day. There were lines of people and of kids. They brought a transport from Hungary, such little kids. They were waiting there. I just wanted that God should strike me dead. I just couldn't bear it. I have nightmares about those lines. After I was liberated, I was 2 years in a sanatorium. It was 2 years later, 2 years after the war. So it was like 5 years out of my life. I was never young. Russian doctors and Czechoslovakian doctors came with the first front. When I was examined, the doctor said to me, "Under normal circumstances, you couldn't have survived. It was just impossible. It was just a medical miracle that you survived. But as I told you, I wanted to live. I said to myself that I just want to live for one day and be free after the war finished. And after that, I didn't care if I lived or died. I knew that from my entire family, that nobody was going to be there. Would you believe it that my husband survived? So I put in an ad at the Red Cross with my name. And then I was looking for my family, and he was looking for his brother. And somebody read it. And that person wrote to his brother, who thought that I was his sister, and he got us together. And then my husband came. They didn't let him into France, as I told you. I was in a sanatorium. So he came to see me from Czechoslovakia. He smuggled in, through the border. We were stateless. We didn't have any state. Nobody wanted us. America didn't want us. Only Israel, maybe. But also to Israel, you had to smuggle. You had to go on boats, and I wasn't in any condition to do that. When my husband and I met after the war, he was not the man I married. And I supposed that I had changed quite a bit myself. But somehow, we found a way to work together because he knew who I was. He was the only person who remembered me from before the war. You feel like you come from nothing. You are nothing. Nobody knows you. It's a very strange feeling. You need some contact, some connection. He was my connection. He knew who I was, and I knew who he was, and we stuck it out together. We were married 35 years or whatever. We had 2 children. He is very different. He copes very differently than I do. And we are here to tell you the story, which is, I don't know. I don't know if it was worth it. I don't know if it was worth it because when I was in concentration camp and I said to myself that after the war people will learn, they will know, they will see, they will learn, but did we really learn anything? I don't know. Chapter 26, Addendum. There was a child named Mordechai who was born to my parents in the Warsaw Ghetto and who died of malnutrition not long thereafter. The husband of my mother's cousin Paula, whose name was Henrik Friedman, raised the alarm about Treblinka. It was decided to go down fighting. The conditions in the Warsaw Ghetto were dehumanizing and demoralizing to the point where the Jews had nothing to lose. Wasn't everything lost already? There was a point in the uprising that the Germans would not go into the ghetto. This was surprising, given that the Germans were well armed and the Jews, for the most part, were unarmed. The Germans were so afraid to go into the ghetto to round up the remaining Jews because they had encountered an amazing and unexpected resistance. Smuggling of food and petrol took place through the sewers and was done by very young boys. The Nazis decided to bomb the ghetto, and this they did to the point where everything was ablaze. Even the people who were hiding underground were overcome by the intense heat, and many died by asphyxiation, for the fires of the burning ghetto consumed almost all of the oxygen. From the ghetto, they were taken to Majdanek, not far from the city of Lublin. There, it was discovered that my grandmother Rivka was alive, but she was very sick. My father had saved a pearl ring that was an heirloom in the family for many years, perhaps centuries. He bribed a Nazi guard to count my grandmother for the daily counting, because she was too sick to work. This arrangement worked for a couple of weeks until the soldier was ordered to the Russian front. Grandmother Rivka was selected for liquidation soon thereafter. She was gassed, and she was cremated in the crematorium in Majdanek. On a recent visit, I obtained a piece of that oven. There are still remnants of ash in the oven. From Majdanek, my father was sent to many labor camps, and my mother was taken to Auschwitz.